Shalom, 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 dear friends. I want to come to you this morning live to bring you up to date on some loose ends to help you better understand the scriptures, especially regarding the often misunderstood of the resurrection of uh, the dead and the promise of afterlife and eternal life. So I'm coming to you from our main sanctuary, our broadcast studio here at New Kingdom at Goshen B'Tzafon. It's my pleasure to make your company. I'm sure it's likewise. I want to tie up some loose ends today because I'm going to continue in the ongoing series of better understanding the end times. But I want to make sure I tie up the loose ends between Shabbats, because if you don't bring these things to the forefront, what invariably happens is you lose your thought, or you lose your trend, and then it never gets shared, it never gets taught, which doesn't benefit the kingdom, um, and it certainly doesn't benefit you guys, right? Okay, so I got a message from a sister, and a very precious sister in YHUH, and she said, Shalia, have you considered that in John 14:2, YHUH uses the Greek word monet for our home when we go to be with Yahusha after the physical life, which means permanent dwelling. Unlike the one that Shaliach Shaul, Paul, used in 2 Corinthians 5:1, which is skenos, a tent, a temporary dwelling, which speaks or refers to our earthly body. So there's a comparison between the earthly and the spiritual, heavenly body. The celestial body is known as Monet, where we get probably beauty, artwork, perfection, masterpiece, not a temporary tent. So we wouldn't need to be resurrected in our tent or physically. Isn't that amazing? So, yeah, it is amazing. And before we get into that, we have to understand that whenever the scriptures talk about resurrection of the dead, it's with a spiritual, heavenly monet as the promise. This idea that it has to be physical is another Judeo-Christian myth from the Talmud and from the Jewish theories. Now, a lot of people say, well, at the time of Yahusha, everybody believed in the bones and the joints coming out of a grave and everything being repasted for another 50, 60, 80 years of torture on earth. Nothing can be further from the truth. And as I've shared in my teachings, according to John chapter 3, YHUH chapter 3, no one had ever gone into the New Jerusalem of heaven except the Son of Man who came down from heaven. So that applied until 30 AD at the resurrection, when Yahusha rose from the dead. It was 30, some say 33. I'm not going to argue about that or fight about that. We can go with 30 just for the sake of the teaching. And so we have the resurrection in Matthew 27, I believe. I'm going to double check for you because I don't want to give you information that's not correct. And they appeared to many in Jerusalem. Matthew 27:53. After Yahusha's resurrection, they entered the Kadosh city and appeared to many. So the they, first we're going to mark the they. Okay, I want to mark the they. And then we have Yahusha bless his Kadosh name and bless the scriptures that has revealed this to all of us, you, me, and even more on a daily basis, is the resurrection in 70 AD, which is the main resurrection. Okay. So the question is, two questions in this brief teaching. The first question is is the resurrection physical, spiritual, or both? And we'll answer that. The second question is, who are the first fruits who rise in Revelation chapter 20, and then who is everybody else? And there's a few things intertwined here, okay? So first, let's get right to our text. So in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, and let's see if we can get this a little bit better for you guys. There you go. In 2 Corinthians chapter 5, we're going to go right into the Greek so there's no misunderstanding. We know that if our earthly house, oikia, which is the tent, see, there's the physical. So the physical is the temporal tent. Just like Sukkot, we put it up and we tear it down. That's like life. We put it up, we tear it down. It's temporal. So the earthly house, the physical body, is called a temporary tent, which will be destroyed. It's not going to be fixed, repaired, patched up, band-aided. It's going to be destroyed. But in exchange, because we're children of the resurrection, Yahuwah is going to give us an oikodomen, meaning a building from Yahuwah himself, a house not made with hands. So that's a nice way, it's a polite way of saying there's no penis and vagina involved. I'm not trying to be crass, but if we really want to finally understand the resurrection, then we need to use all the tools necessary, because we have to meander and wade ourselves through 2,300, 2,200 years of lies and half-truths, myth-truths, quarter-truths, eight-truths, one-eighth truths, which are dangerous, tree of the knowledge of good and evil, mixed. So the house not made with hands or sexual organs or man's will. John chapter 3 talks about we're not born of the will of man. Well, the will of man is another nice copacetic way of saying intercourse. And I don't have a problem with that, because, you hear these words on the news, you hear these words in commercials, you see gay people kissing in commercials. I mean, the assembly has to get real. If you don't get real, you're not gonna reach people. People are gonna keep watching commercials where gay people are selling pharmaceuticals and think it's okay. So this is clear that the great exchange is the temporal tent for the permanent house. The permanent house is not made with hands. It's made by Yahuwah in the Ruach for the children of the Ruach. Now let's go to John. So we see the word there. The word there for our temporary tent. Anything physical is temporary. Okay, we're not going to be raised physically, because that just means Yahuwah is going to give us another temporary dwelling. Right? That doesn't make any sense. He's going to remove the temporary dwelling that's sick, falling apart, leaking, and then he's going to give us another temporary dwelling. You really don't want that. I mean, honestly, it sounds nice. I could be with mommy and daddy again, but you really don't want that. Job said, a man who is born of a woman, his days are very few and full of suffering. Just relax, take a deep breath, and then you're honest with you. You don't really want that. So Yahuwah is not going to give you another tent. He's going to give you something else. And if we go to the book of YHUH in chapter 14, and we pick it up in verse 2, Yahushua said, I go to prepare a place for you, and I will come again. Of course, that was in 70 AD, to receive you unto myself, so that where I am, you may be also. Okay? And now let's go into, so we're going to have in the resurrection, not one of the several 10 million resurrections that Judaism and the church thinks they know about, so they think they can teach you, and they know nothing about it, because Yahushua said very clearly in Matthew 22, you don't know you don't know the scriptures or the power of Yahuwah to resurrect. So if you're not understanding the scriptures, you're not going to understand what the power of Yahuwah to resurrect is for. Now, I'm not saying this comes overnight. This took me more than 40 years to get to this understanding, but I'm just sharing it with you, rather than pondering it in my heart and eating breakfast or something else I could be doing this morning. I come to you because if I need it, you need it. If I need this understanding, you need this understanding. So in the house of the Father of mine are Monet. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? Those abiding places, those bridal chambers where we have intimacy, Yada Yahuwah, no Yahuwah. So when we say Yada Yahuwah, which means praise be to Yahuwah, it also means no Yahuwah. It's also a call to intimacy. Yada Yahuwah is a call to intimacy because it says Adam knew Eve, and that word there is Yada. That's intercourse. But in this case, it's spiritual intercourse. So we have that spiritual interconnectivity in the heavens because there are many Monet. There are many, many Monet. One for you, one for me. Each one of the wives of the Messiah, he married us in 70 AD. So we need 70 AD to complete the marriage. Because otherwise we have a bridegroom who left us waiting at the altar for 2,000 years. What happens after 2,000 years? Hope deferred makes the heart sick. Right? So what kind of a bride is going to be happy waiting at the altar for 2,000 years? Especially after the bridegroom swore on a stack of Bibles, metaphorically speaking, that he's going to come back in the first century. It's a joke. I mean, what we used to believe, when you stop and you really take a deep breath, do some breathing, and you stop and think what we used to believe, it's almost like we're ashamed. We're ashamed that we didn't question the return of JC and the rapture of the church in 2,300 years, or whatever, however you want to package that. It's still the same lie. But part of that same lie is the physical resurrection. As much as I would like to be physically resurrected, if I could, why would I share a lie to you when there's no hope in a lie? There's absolutely no hope in a lie. So we're going to receive a Monet, and if you were not going to receive a spiritual body, a Monet, a masterpiece, a work of artistry, perfectly fit for the heavens, Yahushua says, I would have told you. If you were going to be physically resurrected from the dead and the bones and the dust and everything would pop back up, I would tell you. But I'm going to prepare a place for you. So where is Yahushua today? He is in the Greek Uriana, the heavens, and he has already, because he married us, he has the right to already prepare a place. So when he rose in 30 AD, he prepared the place, and he came back in 70, so that when we die, we immediately go into the mansion, and we immediately go into that chamber. Now let's go to 1 Corinthians 15. Okay, so you have the basic comparison between a tent and a house. Okay, the Father's house, or the Father's Monet, are secure, permanent dwellings. They are secure, permanent dwellings, not made with hands, i.e., hands that engage in sexual reproduction or procreation. I mean, that's the scriptures being polite, which means the will of man requires the hands of man, which requires sexual stimulation. Okay, I mean, let's be adults here. Let's not. If you need to put the children out of the room, do so. But at least we're learning for the first time what kind of resurrection we can expect. So now let's go to 1 Corinthians 15, and we could. It's a lot of stuff here. Okay, so I mean a lot, and we're certainly not going to do that in a quick update. I'm just not going to do that. But let's see. On the other hand, if I use the verses that we can get out of the RST&E, then I think we could make some quick headway. Okay? So I'm going to go to rstne.com. Hopefully all of you have that bookmarked as the ultimate source of restoration scriptural truth. Of course, it's Yahuwah who's the ultimate, but you understand what I'm saying. This is up to date. We're not afraid to update things. We're not afraid to add or subtract from the word, because we don't. We just simply don't. We just bring it fully up to date. All the stuff that has been purposely lied about or hidden from us. So I'm going to put this up on the screen and we can go quickly. I'm not going to share all the verses, and hopefully we'll hit on everyone. Okay, and I've taught on this before, but I want to tie it in. And then I want to bring it to Revelation 20, because that's the part that confuses people. And before I forget, in order to establish an eschatological doctrine, you cannot start in Revelation. Guys, in order to understand a doctrine, ideally you want to start in Genesis or the Torah, or ideally you want to start in the Torah and Isaiah and Ezekiel, adding and producing second and third witnesses. You see, when you have to start a doctrine at the end of the book, and then you pull a single verse out of the end of the book, invariably what's going to happen is you're going to be way off base, because you're divorcing the doctrine that you're attempting to create from the full revelation of Scripture, starting all the way back in the Garden of Eden. Okay, y'all follow what I'm saying, I hope, right? And it's very important. So when you're establishing a doctrine, again, you cannot start in the book of Revelation and pick one verse, which also then you misinterpret. So you pick one or two verses at the end and you misinterpret it, okay? And then you establish an entire doctrine. You just can't do that. Boy, I look like a light bulb in this thing, huh? Let me see if I can lower myself a little bit here. Make myself a little bit more presentable. There you go. That was awfully bright, I would say. Awfully bright. Let's see. I want to get a little bit. Sorry about that. There me goes. Let's see. That's better. Yeah. Okay. So, and that's the problem with the little season. These are people who believe YHUH came. They're good people. They're quality people. They're seekers. They're Bereans. They're my brothers. And I appreciate all the research that the little season people have done. And I'm not saying that to blow smoke up your chimney. I truly appreciate it, because I've read a lot of their teachings and they were a great help to me. The problem is you can't take a verse in Revelation and begin to establish a thread and claim that it's a scarlet thread, which is of Yahusha and his blood, and that it is finished word categorical doctrine when it's not, okay? So, but remind me to go back to Revelation chapter 20. So in 1 Corinthians 15, he's talking about the resurrection, and he's setting the record straight there, just like we're setting it straight today, because nobody really got it then. Nobody's really getting it today. So, or very few, I should not say nobody, but you know what I'm saying, very few. So the topic is the resurrection. Mashiach has risen, etc. We're not false witnesses. If the dead do not rise, Messiah did not rise. Now, he is the exception. He rose physically. I want to make that clear. He rose physically as a sign, the sign of Jonah. That was physical. I want to make that clear. Okay? But we are spiritual children. We are his offspring, and he is a living spirit, right? For as in Adam, for as by man came the death, by man also came the resurrection. For as in Adam all die the death, even so in Messiah all shall be made alive. So we covered this before. The death was spiritual death, because Yahuwah said in Genesis 3, the day that you eat, you will surely die. Now, it cannot be physical, because Adam didn't die until 930 years or 900 some odd years later. So the death that has to be reversed, the curse, the death that has to be reversed, is the spiritual death. I understand Yahushua died physically. That was a sign to that generation. That was a sign to all generations that he is Yahuwah come in the flesh. But we are not Yahuwah come in the flesh. All right? We are produced by the will of man. Okay? So it's very important to understand. He did not die. He died the death. Okay, so then he goes on and explains it. And I want to get to the exact text. Please read 1 Corinthians 15 in its entirety. And then in verse 36, Paul says, we're foolish because we still don't understand that he's going to give us a Monet and not a Skenea. Okay, we're still looking for him to give us a Skenos, Skenos, a temporary tent. We were asking him to refurbish or remodel the tent, the Skenos. And he has something better for us. He has the Monet, you see? And we keep begging him for the Skenos because we don't understand. So Shaliach Shaul says, you don't understand because you're still foolish. You're just foolish. You need to grow up in this area. Verse 37, 1 Corinthians 15:37. That's what you sow is not the body that shall be, but the bare grain, that by chance it may result in wheat or barley or some other grain. In other words, the grain is what goes into the ground, but the fruit or the wheat comes out of the ground. It's different. So we go into the ground physically and we come out different. Yahusha was the exception. He went into the ground physically and he came out physical. Verse 37, we go into the ground and we come out different with a different kind. See, verse 38, Elohim has given each body difference as it has, every seed is different. All flesh is not the same flesh. There is one kind of flesh for man, beasts, fish, and another for birds. See? So there's different flesh. Will we receive flesh? It'll be a spiritual body. And whatever that spiritual body entails. If it has eyes, if it has arms, I don't know and I don't care. The bottom line is we're going down with our skenos, 2 Corinthians 5:1-2, and we're coming up with a body that is a Monet, not made by human will or human hands. They're different kind of bodies. Not all bodies are physical. Look at verse 40. There are earthly bodies and there are heavenly bodies. So it's right there. We go down an earthly body and we don't come up an earthly body. We go down an earthly body and we come up a heavenly body because each one has a different kind of Tiferet, glory. There's one Tiferet, verse 41, of the Shemesh, the sun, the stars, the moon. Every creation has a different beauty. So is our resurrection. See, he's talking to us, to the Corinthians. Audience relevance. He's not talking about Yahusha. Yahusha was raised physically. It is sown in dishonor. It is raised in beauty, in glory. It is sown in weakness, physical. It is raised in power because it will become a powerful body in a powerful resurrection. And here's the key. It is sown naturally, meaning physically, from the will of man. It is sown, as 2 Corinthians 5:1-2 clearly teach us, a skenos. And as John chapter 14, verse 2 teach us, it is raised a Monet. It's sown a skenos. It is raised a Monet. The first Adam was made a living being. The last Adam became a life-giving ruach. So he gives us spiritual life. The spiritual Adam was not first, but the second Adam. The first man is of the earth, earthy. The second man is the Master Yahuwah from heaven. And here's the key, another key verse. As we have borne the physical Adam, the image of the physical Adam, so we will bear the image of the heavenly Adam, who is a spirit. Yahushua said those who worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. As we have borne the physical, like Adam, we will bear the Monet. So Adam, the first Adam, gave us the skenos. The second Adam gives us the Monet. And verse 50, again, to recap, I say that flesh and blood will not inherit the mansion or the Monet. Neither will your physical body be resurrected, because your corruption cannot inherit corruption. And the word says in Romans, the kingdom of Yahweh is not meat and drink, but peace, righteousness, and joy in the Ruach HaKadosh. In Luke 17, it says that to enter the kingdom, it doesn't come by observation. Okay? It doesn't come by, the kingdom of Yahweh is within you. In other words, you are his bride. The Spirit is in you, which is proof that you will receive your Monet. So even if you have a little seed of the mustard seed of the Spirit, even if you have a little amount of the Ruach HaKadosh, okay, it doesn't matter. That is a sincere deposit. It's a sincere pledge that Philippians 1:6, he that began a good work in you will perform it. Now, let's take this all the way to Revelation 20. And this is the confusing part here. And it doesn't need to be confusing if you know how to approach it. Okay, so we go to Revelation 20. And we're going to, I may have to keep some of this open for you guys. Okay, let me just give me a second. I don't want to overburden my computer. So if we go to Revelation chapter 20, and again, this is where the little season doctrine comes from, and you cannot start. You cannot. Because if you have a little season in Revelation 20 and you don't have it anywhere else in Scripture, you cannot trust that and you cannot teach that. So we go to Revelation 20. I saw a heavenly malach come down from the Shemayim, having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain. He laid hold of the dragon, the old serpent, who is S period A period 10, and bound him for an undefined period of years. Well, how come it doesn't say millennium? I'll tell you why. Because the Greek word for millennium is a completely different word. It's millennium, similar to the English or the Latin. But here in the Greek, and if you want me to show it to you, I can. In Strong's, the Greek word is chelioi. That it doesn't mean 1,000 years. It means Satan is bound for an undefined period. Now, that undefined period was from 30 to 70 AD, the 40 years of the Exodus, to allow the Exodus and to allow the gospel to be preached in all the world. Let me say that again. When we read in Colossians and other scriptures, it says that by the end of the first century, the gospel had been preached into all the known world. That doesn't mean every single part of the world, because there were parts of the world and parts of the earth that were not known, and the parts of the earth at that time that were not reachable. Okay? So the actual Greek says, and if you want me to prove it to you, I'm not going to take the time. Actually, I would prefer you do the homework. You can go to Bible Hub, you can go to eSword. I don't care what sword you want to go to. Just go to any kind of sword that you want. Okay? It really doesn't matter what kind of sword. And the text will read the same. It will read that the dragon, notice it doesn't say demons. Notice it doesn't say the Nephilim. Notice it doesn't say his children, because that evil continues to this day. And that's why we have to wrestle against, we don't have to wrestle against flesh and blood, but power, spiritual wickedness, unclean spirits, authorities, principalities in high places. So Satan is bound for an undefined period of time. Now we know that that's 40 years, because in Luke chapter 9, on the Mount of Transfiguration, Moses and Elijah were asking YHUH about the Exodus. The word there is not regarding his death that he was going to accomplish, like most translations. They were allegedly talking about his death in Jerusalem as the lamb, which he would accomplish. No, the Greek word there is not death. It is exodo, the Exodus. So Satan is bound for 40 years, just like Mastema in the book of Jubilees. Mastema was bound so that Israel could be redeemed on Passover and go through the 40 years before they get to the promised land. But when they got to the promised land, there were still giants, right? There were still Nephilim, right? When they got to the promised land. So same with us. So it doesn't mean there's no more evil. It just means so that the gospel cannot be choked and killed, because Satan wanted to kill the message in its beginning. Satan wanted to kill the message in its infancy. So there was an undefined period of years, because John didn't know. He was writing in 66 AD, and that the Exodus was underway, and he didn't know for how many more years the gospel would have freedom to be proclaimed to reach all the world before YHUH returned in 70 AD. So that's why he says it's undetermined. It's undefined. Okay, so now let's jump down to verse 4 and 5. We have the mark. We can read that on your own. I want to focus in on the resurrection. I don't want to focus in on the mark of the beast or get sidetracked, okay? So this is what's always confused you, because it's always confused me. Number one, I want to say that this parenthetical is not in many manuscripts. Let me say that again. This parenthetical that I've highlighted is added to the text. It's not in many manuscripts of Revelation. So that is suspicion number one. But let's go with it. Let's assume that all this parenthetical is what John wrote. Let's just, the benefit of the doubt. Let's go with the benefit of the doubt. Okay? So how does all this fit in with us and the resurrection? The first resurrection Blessed is he that is blessed and kadosh is he that has part in the first resurrection. On such a second death has no power, but they shall be Kohanim of Yahuwah and Mashiach and reign with him for an undefined period of years. Okay, now who are these that were raised in the first resurrection? That's a good question. Here's your answer. The answer is we don't have to grasp for straws. We don't have to just create a straw man. All right, we don't have to look for or speculate as most futurists do. It's right here. I saw the beings of those who were beheaded. These are the martyrs. They were beheaded for the word of Yahuwah. So who rose in Matthew 27? When the master rose in Matthew 27:53, and many of the saints rose with him. Who were those people? Those were those who were martyred. They were the martyrs. It tells you right here. They were beheaded. This is the first resurrection. But the rest of the dead did not live until after the Exodus, or the 40 years, not millennium. The word millennium is not there. Look it up yourself. I'm going to do that for you. You look it up yourself. It is the Greek word. I put it here for you. Greek 5507, chilioi. Chilioi. It sounds like the English word chili, which I love. I love some beef. I love me some beef chili. How about you? Especially hot on a cold winter day. So it's an undefined period of years. And John didn't know when it would end because he was writing in 66, and the 40-year Exodus would not end for another 4 years. So who rose with Yahusha? Those are the 144,000. Those are the first fruits. The 144,000 in Revelation 7:1 and Revelation 14:1. Those are the 144,000. They're not going to be 144,000 coming in 3,000 years, and they're Jewish evangelists, and they're eating corned beef sandwiches and potato knishes, and they eat in the Jewish delicatessen, and they're going to be touched with the gospel and miraculously wake up from their unbelief. No, come on, man. You can't understand scripture with that kind of speculation. Very simple. The first resurrection are those who were beheaded. They are the martyrs. Even if we agree with the parentheses, and we don't fight the parentheses, right? We don't fight the parentheses. Okay, fair enough. So we go from here to here. And the rest of the dead will be resurrected when the undefined period is finished. Well, by now you should know where I'm going. If Yahusha returned in 70, and everybody else that was not martyred, the only way you would rise in the first resurrection if you were 144,000 that were martyred from Adam to Messiah Yahusha's resurrection. From Adam till the second Adam rose from the dead in 30 AD. Every single person that was martyred or killed for righteousness, martyr and different versions of martyrdom, head, death, piercing with an arrow. Okay, maybe a righteous king of Israel was martyred. Maybe a righteous king of Judah. There were no righteous kings of Israel. Maybe a righteous king of Judah was martyred, but he was martyred in a war on behalf of Yahuwah, fighting Satan or Baal or the Moabites or the Midianites. That person was a martyr. So all the martyrs from Adam until the second Adam rose in the beginning of the undefined period, or the beginning of the Exodus Chilioi. The Exodus Chilioi. Luke 9, they discussed the Exodus that he was about to enact by his physical resurrection, which was to take place and last for 40 years. And Yahusha taught of the kingdom of Yahuwah, about the kingdom of Yahuwah after his resurrection, for 40 days, one day for each of the 40 years of the Exodus. Now, when the undefined period of years were over, verse 5, look at verse 5, then the rest of the dead lived. Notice it didn't say the rest of the dead rose. It says the rest of the dead lived, meaning they never died. So, very simple as we close. 30 AD, the martyrs. The Chilioi, the Exodus years, the 40 years are over. The word millennium is not in the Greek. It is probably in your Bible unless you have the RST&E, but it is not in the Greek. So after that period, and Yahusha taught us, and John taught us, it is 40 years. Then the rest of us live. Notice, we're not resurrected. To be absent from the body is to be what? Present with Yahuwah. So everybody after Yahushua returned automatically goes from death to life in the instant, in the twinkling of an eye. And those who were alive when Yahushua returned in 70 AD didn't die. There was one generation that was alive when Yahushua returned in 70. One part of that generation that didn't die. So again, to recap as we close, 30 AD, the resurrection of the martyrs. 70 AD, the living were caught up. They didn't die. They went from death to life, the living. And everybody else since 70 AD goes from death to life. And are we as blessed as the martyrs? No. The martyrs are blessed because they were assigned the honor of being the first fruits and the first fruit resurrection. According to James, Yaakov, we are kind. The Kehillah, the assembly, is kind of like a first fruits. We're not the first fruits. Why? Because we're not martyrs. So if you read Yaakov very carefully in the Greek, it says that we are like a kind of first fruits, but we are not the 144,000 because fortunately, up until this point, the master has not asked us to be martyred. So this is a very intense but short teaching. I'm going to make it available immediately. I suggest you share this with at least 10 people because sometimes concisement and simplicity really clears up a lot of things. All right? And we'll get this translated into Portuguese as well. So shalom, shalom from our main sanctuary. We'll see you guys, Yahuwah willing, soon on this Shabbat and every Shabbat. And we'll sit down at the same table and we'll break open the word. That's what we always do. Shalom, shalom.